Did you know your city council or board of supervisors can determine what programs you watch on your local public cable channels? Our full disclosure program has been fighting to remain on public channels so we can bring you the news behind the news as a public service. In some cities, local politicians have actually tried to remove our shows from the public cable stations because they don't want you to know what they're doing. One of our candidate debates was even stopped during production at a city-controlled cable channel.
Cut. Sorry.
Oh, so good.
We
don't have time for this segment. We have to do the closing.
We want your opinion on this issue. Should our public cable channels be censored by local politicians? Let your elected officials and cable company know you want full disclosure. To cast your vote and send a message to your local cable company, go to fulldisclosure.net or call 800-867-7777. Full Disclosure, the news behind the news.
Wow. Greetings upon greetings. Let me go the Anglicist thing of my way, isn't it?
Greetings. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
Happy Earth Strong. Sorry.
The last official holiday before school starts.
What school starting? Let's be real. Seriously?
Yeah, school's going to start, man. Regardless if it's online or in class, school starting, period.
So it's good that school's starting. I think school needs to be starting for adults too. You know, you can join us for classes every Friday. This video that we just saw. So this whole censorship thing is interesting because this is nothing new. It's just as technology develops, so does the censorship. It's like the more we know, they have to find different ways to like censor us. I find that interesting.
Yeah, that happens, you know. As you said, you know, everything grows with time, right?
And what I'm learning now, and this week what we're going to show you guys is that this is not just happening in Canada. It's not just happening on social media platforms. This is happening all over the world. And I have a fantastic set of researchers who dug up some great information for me. So I'm going to present that to you now. Let's start with the beginning of this. So censorship right now is rampant globally. There's a banning of information everywhere, guys. This is happening everywhere. And a lot of it has to do with COVID-19. Mm-hmm. So censorship is happening in Bangladesh, and we're going to talk about all of these countries. So Bangladesh, Cambodia, China, Egypt, well, China's not a surprise, Egypt, Ethiopia, Turkey, Venezuela. Journalists and others have been arrested and detained for reporting on or expressing any opinions that have to do with COVID-19 on social media. So Egypt and China have expelled journalists. Do you know if we were in any of these countries right now, we wouldn't even be on?
I used to work. So I'm not sure the viewers know that I used to work for the bank, right? And a very long time ago, I met a gentleman from Africa. I forget which African country. However, though, he was a journalist, and actually he was in exile.
Oh, he got expelled. So this has been happening for a while.
Right.
In Bolivia, authorities have used COVID-19 as justification to threaten political opponents with up to, listen to this, 10 years for spreading misinformation. So there'll be a whole heap of us. Dave Icke would be in jail. Dr. Buttar would be in jail.
We would be
in jail. It's no joke, guys. This is a serious thing. So, and you know what? Listen, there may come a time. We're laughing now, but there may come a time because they're starting to tighten down on things even here in the Western world. So let's start with Bangladesh first. So in Bangladesh, government appears to be cracking down on free speech as COVID-19 was hitting the country. So silencing anyone who expressed concern over the government's handling of the epidemic. Human Rights Watch said that the authorities should stop targeting academics and arresting people for speaking out about the coronavirus epidemic and ensuring that accurate and timely information about the virus is accessible and available to all. So since about mid-March 2020, authorities have apparently arrested at least a dozen people, including a doctor, opposition activists, and some students for their comments about coronavirus, most of them under the draconian Digital Security Act. So the information minister announced that it has formed a unit to monitor social media and various television outlets for rumors about COVID-19. we'd be locked up, guy. If we were in Bangladesh, jail. Let's go to the next country and see if we'd be in jail there.
Cambodia. So Human Rights Watch has documented the arrest of 17 people since late January 2020 for sharing information about the coronavirus in Cambodia. These include 4 members or supporters of the dissolved opposition Cambodia National Rescue Party, or better known as CNRP, all of whom remain in pretrial detention.
We would be in pretrial detention.
Dead time.
Oh my
That's what they call it,
gosh.
dead time, right? So the authorities also arrested and questioned a 14-year-old girl who expressed fears on social media about rumors of positive COVID-19 cases at her school in her province. 12 were released from detention after signing pledges to not to spread fake news in the future, to apologize, right? So, I mean, it's crazy in regards to what's taking place right now, right? The article continues to state here that the Cambodian government's harassment of political opposition members and supporters in the context of COVID-19 is part of a broader campaign against civil society activists, independent journalists, and ordinary people who express their views both online and offline, Human Rights Watch said. It's a mouthful. Right, so the government has repeatedly said it would adopt a fake news law, a cybercrime law, and amendments to media law, all of which are likely to curtail the right to freedom of expression and to facilitate arbitrary and unfettered surveillance of those deemed descendants.
Let me just wrap all of that nice language in one little bow. You can't talk. That's it. If you're not saying what the government is saying, you're not allowed to talk. What happened to freedom of speech?
Gone.
Gone.
In the digital age, right?
Gone. Let's head over to great old China. So since mid-December, the Chinese government has tried to control the flow of information regarding the epidemic. There's considerable misinformation on Chinese social media, and authorities have legitimate reasons to counter false information that can cause public panic. But rather than rebutting false information and disseminating reliable facts, the authorities in some instances have appeared more concerned with silencing criticism. So in recent weeks, police across China have detained dozens of people for their online posts related to the virus.
Oh, wow.
On January 25th, Taizhen, I'm going to say Taizhen.
No problem.
Taizhen police detained a man for 10 days for maliciously publishing aggressive, insulting speech against medical personnel.
Wow.
Authorities in various localities ordered medical personnel treating infected patients not to speak to the media. Why wouldn't they want them to speak to the media? I'm curious. Probably because I think one of our shows not too long ago, we talked about a Chinese doctor who was treating their medical patients with vitamin C. Yes, guys, vitamin C, which means that maybe that could be why they don't want them to talk.
It's very possible.
Could be. So they've also blocked some journalists from reporting government personnel, and they've escorted BBC journalists away from Henan province. The police claimed that there was no problems in the area, and so there was no need for a journalist to be there. What? We'd be locked up there too.
Wow. No problems in the area. China. In Ethiopia, or as the Rastaman would say, Ethiopia.
Gone to our continent now. All right.
Authorities in Ethiopia should immediately and unconditionally release journalist Yeseyu Shimelis and cease detaining journalists without charge, the Committee to Protect Journalists said today. Yeseyu contributes a column to the privately owned Fete magazine and hosts a weekly political program on Tigray TV, a broadcaster owned by the Tigray regional government, according to those friends. He also posts original reporting on his Facebook account and on the Ethio Forum YouTube channel, which he administers, they said as well. In his report, Yeseyu alleged that Ethiopian government had told religious leaders to prepare for 200,000 graves to accommodate deaths from the virus, according to the journalist friends and Adidas Maleda.
Can we pause for a second?
Go on with it.
I have some questions. How would they know to prepare 200,000 graves? How they know that so many people are going to die from this? Where would they have gotten that information from, Dave?
Good question. I have no answers.
This is probably why he's in jail. Okay, I'll let you continue with this.
All right. So, in his report, you say you alleged that. Sorry, we already said that part.
Yes,
sorry,
the 200,000 people. We got that.
All right. So, imprisoning a journalist at this time when the public needs information rather than censorship is likely to discourage critical reporting and dissenting opinions, said a CPJ Sub-Saharan Africa representative. And I apologize ahead of time, but Matoki Mumo.
I did this on purpose because you can say these names better than I can. I would have completely messed that up.
Ethiopian authorities should immediately and unconditionally release Yeyeseru Shemelis and guarantee that they will not censor reporting on the coronavirus. So, I mean, we can see in regards to what's taking place worldwide.
Yeah, this is why my thing is censor this, because it's like, you guys are not, it's not just happening. I don't feel like I'm an anomaly. This is what they're doing. They don't want us talking about this. But the question a lot of you have to have is why? Why don't they want us talking about this? What is it that they don't want us to say that's not being said?
And aside from the why, it's now, what are we going to continue to do to make sure that the message gets out there?
Me, I could come off a Facebook because they want to censor things. And this is the thing, too. We need to start building larger platforms. Social media platforms.
The platforms are already out there, so that's not the problem.
Okay, well then fine. Then we need to go on those platforms, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see where else this is happening. Turkey, happening there too. The Ministry of Interior has announced that 616 suspects sharing unfounded and provocative social media messages about coronavirus have been identified, and 220 of them have been taken into custody.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, Jesus.
Wow.
So according to the statement of the ministry, the message was posted by sharing unreal images and voice recordings claiming that the necessary adequate measures are not taken by the related institutions or officials, and that the truth is being hidden from the public, and thereby aiming to incite the public to fear, panic, worry on social media, and targeting authorized responsible persons and institutions before the public. They're not, listen, this whole idea of inciting fear, we did an article on that actually, inciting riots, same thing. Like they're controlling how we feel, and people need to understand that that's what's happening. And if you're not feeling the way they want you to feel, they don't like that. All right, what's going on in Bolivia?
So a decree the Bolivian government has issued to respond to the COVID-19 emergency includes an overly broad provision that authorities could use to prosecute those who criticize government policies, Human Rights Watch said earlier today. So the Bolivian government appears to be taking advantage of the pandemic to give itself the power to punish anyone who publishes information the government deems incorrect.
Pause.
Hold
Pause.
on,
We have to pause here, please, for a second.
In violation of free speech protections. Wow. Wow.
So, why do they even have this whole idea of freedom of speech? Why did they even pretend that we have that freedom? What they should have called it is freedom of speech if we say you can speak. That's what they should have called it. Government speech. If you're saying the government speech, then you're free to speak. If you're not saying the government speech, shut your mouth, or we'll throw you in jail, take away all your money, censor you, demonize you. All those other things.
Well, it all ties into, of course, the whole democratic process to vote.
Who? The who?
The democratic process
to vote. Is that liberal? Like a liberal process to vote? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's exactly it. Just right? It's all ties in. It's all the same, right?
Right side, left side, all that thing. Left wing, right wing,
all that chicken wing.
Thank you. Continue.
America's all right. So that quote was said by Jose Miguel Vivanco. He's an America's director at Human Rights Watch. So he also continued to state here that vigorous debate is the best medicine against the incorrect information, not prison terms.
Right.
And March 18th, Interior Minister Arturo Murillo announced that he had ordered the armed forces, police, and his staff to cyber patrol the internet to identify those who misinform the public about coronavirus. Stating that the government would prosecute them, he warned all politicians and mentioned specifically Luis Acre, or Acre. I apologize, right? Not to misinform, right? So he went after somebody specifically in this case, right? So it's nuts. I mean, I'm sure, of course, you know what? If it hasn't flooded here in Americas already, by means we should see it overtly, right? As opposed to the covert terms, which they have been doing for many, many years.
Listen, they just pulled down our video. Listen, we just posted a video on YouTube with the interview with Del Bigtree. 5 hours. 5 hours YouTube pulled it down. 5 hours. What is it? And what was their excuse again?
I don't know what the excuse
was. What was the excuse again, Grant? Impersonating. Who the hell am I impersonating? Myself? Is Del impersonating himself? It's us. That's your excuse? We were impersonating? Or is it that you want us to lock our chat because we're saying things that are going against what you say and we're actually trying to do what's good for our global community? Anyways, bun them. You guys aren't gonna, you guys can't win. People are waking up. All right, so when we come back, we're gonna talk about Trinidad's in the news. Trinidad has some heat on them right now. Yeah, may want to work that out. And of course, we're gonna talk a little bit more about some human right abuses, because what's happening in these countries, the things that we just talked about, Grant, Dave, they're all human rights abuses. I talked to Grant and Dave about this stuff. I don't want you. I don't know.
Listen, my name starts with a D.
We'll see you guys soon on A Better Tomorrow. Really?
Yes.
I started, I was a CBS producer, started on the Dr. Phil show, then I produced the medical talk show, The Doctors. I won an Emmy Award producing that show. See, the thing with masks is that there's no science that actually proves it works, right? I mean, at least, let me rephrase that. There's crappy science that says that masks have some effect, and there's just slightly less crappy science that says it has no effect. Vaccines are a $50 billion industry a year. If you can quadruple that, you start moving towards it being a $1 trillion industry. And I'm talking about just the vaccines that are there. Remember, adults, you got 11 vaccines. Your children got 52. That means you have about 41 vaccines that they can do a catch-up schedule on. Just imagine $100 for one of those vaccines.
The Minister of National Security is tonight warning that at the completion of the amnesty to Venezuelan nationals to register, Anyone found unregistered will be deported. He added he will not tolerate any criminal, whether they are locals or foreigners.
We revert back to the law as it is. So people who come in illegally, we will deport them. Persons who come in and overstay the permitted time they're given by immigration after the 14th of June, we will deport you. I have also, I can announce, made a number of deportation orders for Venezuelans who have been charged and convicted with crimes in Trinidad and Tobago.
We're back.
We're back still. We haven't been arrested, detained. We're still here.
Although, you know, some new bylaws, some new bills.
You may come back in the segment and I'm not here. And that's what's going to happen. Welcome back, everybody, to A Better Tomorrow. We want to thank you for joining us again on this Friday. Join us every Friday. We are here between 1 and 6. Just depending on the day. So what's going on in TNT? Sweet TNT?
All right. So Louise Tolleson, a Caribbean researcher at Amnesty International, said, "It's no secret that Trinidad and Tobago's authorities criminalize irregular entry, contrary to the international human rights standards. But to deport Venezuelan refugees back to the human rights and humanitarian emergency that they were fleeing in the middle of a pandemic is an outrageous violation of the obligations that Trinidad and Tobago has committed to under international law. No one should be forced back to a place where they are at risk of serious human rights violations." So in a press conference on July the 25th, Trinidad and Tobago's Minister of National Security claimed that illegal immigrants and boat people and businessmen that traffic them present a potential health risk and issue a hotline number for people to report to.
Almost like contact tracing.
There you go. Exactly. There you go. Right. He also said that Venezuelans who registered and were given legal residency and the right to work under the government's so-called amnesty process in 2019, who were found to be harboring irregular migrants, could have their residency revoked and face deportation. Landlords found to be renting to irregular migrants and could also be subject to criminal charges, the minister added. See, I got some problems here, right? As you know, the saying goes, friends hook up friends, right? Of course, those in political power hook up their friends, right? Here in Canada, you know, just ask, you know, Trudeau and Bill Morneau, right? They've been hooked up by friends.
Shots were just fired.
No, I mean, you know, hold on.
Shots were just fired.
We're not making shots, you know, we're just speaking some facts right now.
But there was a shot.
Right, so.
How many left in your clip?
In Trinidad. Come on, seriously. All right, so over there in Trinidad, by means, you know, you cannot have these people who speak the language, of course, of the people coming over, not to go and want to help their people, right? Look at people who migrated here. They go in and help their friends.
Yeah,
regardless,
of course,
right? So I mean, you know, like it's just weird. It's you know where we come to in this day and age. By means, you know, in comic books they don't lie. You know, sci-fi they don't lie, right? You can see instances of this, you know, playing out in a lot of movies. You know, as you mentioned, books, comic books, right? Yes. You know, so I mean, you know, like it's again, what are we going to do as a human race to go ahead and fight this, right?
What's Trinidad doing? That's the question right now. Forget about what we are doing.
Right. So 2 days after the conference, on July 27th, Trinidad and Tobago Police Service circulated flyers on Facebook stating that illegal immigration could cause a new wave of COVID-19 and called on people to report suspicious activity.
So hold on. How is that not misinformation? Can you explain that to me? How could a wave of people cause COVID? Like who said that that's possible? And that's not misinformation? And Facebook, don't pull them down? Anyways.
Again, fear, right?
Okay.
Right. So prior to this, local NGO, the Caribbean Center for Human Rights, called on the government to help Venezuelan women and children who may have been trafficked to Trinidad instead of sending them back, including by giving them access to fair and efficient asylum procedures.
Okay.
Right. More than 24 police officials are under the scope for alleged involvement in trafficking between Trinidad and Venezuela. Right? The criminalization of irregular entry has created impunity for human rights violation. Amnesty International believes that this new threat by authorities to criminalize refugees and those in some cases helping them risk pushing people further underground into hiding and away from the health services that could protect the entire population. Right, so I mean, they make some good points here in regards to what to suggest. Right, by means, and especially, in this day and age, once again, we're looking at, like where these people, where the mindset is of these, of course, these so-called leaders. What are they going to do to go ahead, and what are they doing to go ahead and shape, right, the future generation of the country, man? Like, it's just unreal.
So when you just said so-called leaders, that was another gunshot. Just so you know, Dave. Shot was fired again.
Listen. Did you want to take the next story?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
But before we do that, I definitely want to encourage everybody to click onto that Bedell Bigtree interview. Again, if you're just coming in now, in the last segment, I talked about the fact that they had censored us. And within 5 hours of it being up, they pulled that bad boy down. So you can go to Toronto Caribbean News /Del Bigtree. Am I correct with that? TorontoCaribbean.com /Del Bigtree to see that entire.
She means the /. Okay.
/Del Bigtree. You guys just go to Toronto Caribbean website, okay, and look at my article. It's going to be there. It's there. I write all about it, but there's some very good information there for you guys. Speaking of that, so my next story is monitoring anti-democratic trends and human rights abuses in the age of COVID-19. So let's start with El Salvador. So El Salvador has over 1,200 people detained in containment centers for violating curfew order. Do you hear this? This provoked the debate on the legalities of enforcing such measures. The country's Supreme Court ruled on April 8th that curfew violations do not justify arbitrary detentions by the police or military. Does a judge really need to say that? Are you serious, guys? But this is what's happening. And the thing that's interesting about this is that a lot of us don't even realize that our rights and freedoms are being stripped away one by one. They're doing it so slightly that you don't even notice. But you guys, like, things that are happening in El Salvador, don't think that some of this thing can't happen here, because it's going to reach here. Soon you won't be able to do anything. Second wave. Okay. In Honduras, the president issued a decree that temporarily restricted the freedom of speech rights. I'm going to stop here for a second. Which are part of the country's constitution. So hold on. So what you're telling me now, Dave, is what we have to be afraid of is the fact that they are going to find ways to go against the Constitution because they're doing it here.
Well, that's given. Look at, of course, when we reported the story about Manitoba, right, and how they wanted to go ahead and make vaccines mandatory, regardless of medical, right, or religious rights, right? So by means, their aims, it just so happens that, of course, in places such as El Salvador, right, Honduras, right, and so on and so forth, right, the First Amendment rights, that, as the Americans would call it, freedom of speech, so on and so forth, right? By means, it's very altered and it's very miscued, right? So,
well, let's hear why they did it, because there's a reason. So it's claimed that the president did so to curb the spread of misinformation regarding the pandemic. This was criticized by the Inter-America Commission on Human Rights and the United States. First of all, United States, lock your chat. You can't talk. Type of curbing censorship and freedom of speech. Really? Is this what they're trying to say?
They've been doing it.
So Bolivia, interim Inez government has been called to withdraw the decree that threatened prison time for overly broad and vague charges of misinformation and inciting crimes against health. So Bolivia's military is playing a leading role in patrolling streets, building infrastructure, and enforcing border shutdowns. Venezuela. I'm telling you, we're going everywhere. We have to show you guys that this is happening. Sometimes I feel like in Canada, we're in this little closed bubble. So I need to expand so you guys can see what's happening and so you guys can understand that there's a theme here. And every government seems to be picking up on this theme. Let me just leave that there and go into the rest of this. I don't want to spread misinformation or get shut down. So the government has to they have harassed and detained journalists who question official statistics and silence criticism in the governing body's response to COVID-19. So Venezuela, journalists, I feel bad for you. You guys can't talk either. El Salvador. In El Salvador, the military has supported the police in enforcing nationwide curfew orders and cordoning off certain areas. So Mexico's President López Obrador issued an executive order to deploy as many soldiers and National Guardsmen as necessary to support the government's response, which included placing the military in charge of some hospitals and healthcare services, with López Obrador promising the army will cure the people.
Wow. The army will cure the people. I tell you, it's very overt. By means right now, September, October, November, these are the most critical times.
Stay tuned, guys.
Very, very critical times.
Things are happening, and I really hope you guys are paying attention because you need to be prepared when these things start happening here. When lockdown happens, when curfews happen, when they tell you you can't travel 5 kilometers outside of your home, when they tell you only one person can leave your house to go get groceries, our rights are being stripped. Pay attention, guys. When we come back, some other disturbing news. Pedophilia now might become legal, guys. Isn't that scary? Not just that, but there's some stuff happening also in a lot of prisons and to the transgendered community. There seems to be a lot of deaths occurring with transgendered Black women specifically. So we're going to go into more details on that when we come back on A Better Tomorrow. See you guys soon.
I was a CBS producer. Started on the Dr. Phil show, then I produced the medical talk show, The Doctors. I won an Emmy Award producing that show. The thing with masks is that there's no science that actually proves it works, right? I mean, at least let me rephrase that. There's crappy science that says that masks have some effect. And there's just slightly less crappy science that says it has no effect. Vaccines are a $50 billion industry a year. If you can quadruple that, you start moving towards it being a $1 trillion industry. And I'm talking about just the vaccines that are there. Remember, adults, you got 11 vaccines. Your children got 52. That means you have about 41 vaccines that they can do a catch-up schedule on. Just imagine $100 for one of those vaccines.
sponsored and supported bill. I respectfully ask for your aye vote.
Thank you, Ms. Kamlager. Ms. Gonzalez, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I unfortunately am rising in opposition to this bill, and I wouldn't have spoken except that people have misconstrued my opposition, so I want to be very clear. The equity argument that Equality California and others have promoted for this bill, I completely agree with. In fact, I agree with it so much that the amendments that they gave me to take in appropriations, which would have still created a two-tier system, I refuse to take, because it is about equitable solutions. Any sex is sex. I don't care who it's between or what sex act it is. That being said, I cannot, in my mind as a mother, understand how sex between a 24-year-old and a 14-year-old could ever be consensual, how it could ever not be a registerable offense. I don't care what kind of sex it is. I don't care if it's traditional. I'm not going to go there. But the bottom line is, when a 24-year-old has sex with a 14-year-old, it is always in an inequitable situation. Most of the time, it's a teacher and student. It might be a Bible study instructor, a coach, and a student. I've had 14-year-olds. I've asked everybody, as this has sat in my committee for 2 years, amend both sides of the bill. Amend the current situation where one sex act between a 24 and a 14-year-old might be considered consensual by a judge, and amend this so we can have equity, because it should be equitable.
Basically saying that, hey guys, welcome back. She was just basically saying, Dave, because you can't hear it, that she not understand how they can even make this law a law. And what law are we talking about? Run that, Dave.
Oh boy, it's with a heavy heart that I go ahead and say something. Read this right now. However, though, of course, information is priceless.
And it's power.
Right, so those out there who may find this sickening, good.
I'm sorry.
You have to be aware.
Sorry.
All right, so in California, this bill is going to hit Governor Gavin's newsroom desk, which would lower the penalties for adults who have consensual sex with minors if the perpetrator is within 10 years of age with the victim.
Oh, Lord, have mercy.
If signed into law, a 24-year-old could have sexual relations with a 15-year-old child.
Pause. Can we stop here for a second? Please? You get so upset when I pause you. Should I let you finish and then go into my rant?
Go. You've already done it, so go ahead.
What is a 24-year-old doing with a 15-year-old? 14-year-old. I understand that, you know what, people go through things, that there might be a medical health challenge that's associated with pedophilia. But making this okay, I don't know. I guess maybe I'm going to ask the community how you guys feel about it. I'm going to let Dave finish talking about this. Sorry, Dave. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
All right. So I'm going to repeat the quote once again.
Yes.
Right. So if signed into law, a 24-year-old could have sexual relations with a 15-year-old child without being required to register as a sex offender. Right, that was written in a quote, a tweet by State Senator Shannon Grove. Right, the current law states that it is illegal for an adult to have consensual sex with teenagers between 14 to 17 years old who are not of age to give consensual for vaginal intercourse, and the offender does not require to be listed on the state's sex offender registry. Did I say that wrong?
It's vaginal.
Okay.
Vaginal.
Hey, it is what it is, man. People understand what's going on, okay? All right, so as the offender is within 10 years of age of a minor, instead, the judge has decided to decide that based on facts of the case, whether it is warranted for the perpetrator to register on the sex offender list. Again. Wow. Absolutely. Oh boy. So, oral and anal intercourse require a sex offender registration.
What?
Yes. So, penetration? No.
No.
Oral or
anal? Yes.
Yes.
I feel like, and it's true, people are just making up things as they go along. And it's just so funny that there's all these, pedophilia rings being found in Hollywood and in politics and Epstein. And all of a sudden now,
I think
it's okay. Is this a coincidence?
I think this is, purposely done to go ahead and protect those rings.
Absolutely, this is being done to protect them. Absolutely. All these people who are saying they were not involved, y'all were on Epstein's island. You were there. Stop denying it. There's pictures. Bill Gates. You're one of them. Go on.
Can't forget Oprah, too, while you're at it, right?
Oprah, Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, all of y'all were there.
State Senator Scott Weiner, who is at the center of it, believes that the present law disproportionately targets LGBT young people for mandatory sex offender registration, since LGBT people cannot usually engage in vaginal intercourse. Right. Critics of the bill claim that instead of the bill including vaginal intercourse with minors as an act that requires mandatory sex offender registry, the bill makes all criminal sex acts with minors over 14 equal by providing offenders with a loophole to evade the registration on the sex offenders list. Any sex is sex, argued Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez. I don't care who it is between or what that sex act is. That being said, I cannot in mind as a mother understand how sex between a 24-year-old and a 14-year-old could ever be consensual.
There's a power dynamic. It's not consensual. At 24, you're well-versed, mostly, in sex. At 15, you are not. So, okay. All right.
Oh boy. So, however, Weiner explained that the bill does not change the potential sentencing for having sex with underage minors. The bill would allow judges to evaluate whether the accused is warranted to be registered as a sex offender.
We'll leave that with you guys. Oh, man. You guys can comment on this.
Protect your babies, please.
Protect your children.
Please, protect your babies.
Protect your children, especially
right.
with the internet now and with all the stuff that's happening. Protect your children. They may get pissed at you and say, oh my God, Mom, Dad, you're so annoying. Yeah, well, I'm saving you from that guy who's 28 and you're 18. Let's just say that. Or now that it's a 10-year thing, they could be 20 and your child could be 10. I just want to put that out there for you guys to think about, really and truly. Or someone who's 22 who could be having sex with your 12-year-old child and not get charged for it. Something's going on, guys. This world, man. Something's not right. Anyways, let's talk about some things happening in the LGBTQ plus community. So imprisoned trans women are reporting that they are facing some abuse. And we're going to talk about this a little bit. So in June, 6 Black trans women, Bravla Stone, Mercy Mack, Shaki Peters, Drea McCrary, Tatiana Hall, and Bree Black were found dead within a 9-day period. At the end of July, 2 other Black trans women, Quisha D. Hardy and Tiffany Harris, became the 20th and 21st trans women murdered this year. So the killing of trans and gender non-conforming people disproportionately target Black trans women and trans women of color. In 2018, 82% of trans people killed were trans women of color. In 2019, 26 trans women died from fatal violence. 20 of those women were Black. A report by the Human Rights Coalition found that of fatal violence in the trans and gender non-conforming communities between 2013 and 2018, 95 of the 128 victims identified as either being Black or African American. To me, honestly, Dave, this is not even news. It no matter what your sex is, they're killing us off one by one. It don't even matter what you identify as sexually. You're Black, you're dying. This is just what's happening. At least 103 were trans women of color, they're saying, 103 of those. So behind prison walls, there's even more danger happening back there. So trans women apparently are targeted for physical, sexual, and fatal violence. When they attempt to report their assaults, they are subjected to additional violence from both prison staff and those around them. So trans women in men's prisons are 13 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than cisgendered men. By the way, can someone tell me what cisgendered is? I have no idea. I feel like this is a new gender. I don't know it. Do you know it, Dave? Do you know it, Grant? Do you know what cisgendered is? Okay. Please, someone, if you guys know, put it in the comments. I have no idea. According to data provided by CDCR, over 50% report fearing for their safety if they report harassment and discrimination of violence. So while there's no data about the intersection of race, gender identity, and retaliation for reporting sexual abuse, they do note that they have been seeing ongoing retaliation against trans women of color who report sexual abuse. I'm saddened by this part of it too, because unfortunately, people are people. It doesn't matter what you identify as. And the fact that these people are being discredited and being killed at this rate is a concern. And of course, it's even more concerning because it's being hidden. This stuff is not being put out there anywhere. So again, it's still our duty to make sure that people know what's going on. If you have any comments about this, definitely leave it in our comment section. And of course, if you like some of the stuff that we're saying, mind you, you probably don't like any of this, but if you want to talk about it a little bit, press like and share this so that other people can make comments about it and talk about it a little bit. We need to just get the dialogue going and wake people up a little bit.
Yeah, at the end of the day, right?
That's all it comes down to.
Let's go ahead and spark the light.
So we have one more segment, and we're going to be talking about something that was trending this week, and it's the fact that CDC updated their COVID-19 numbers, talking about the different the deaths that have happened, and of course, they've now made sure that they have their little minions, is what I call them, who try to bury the news in words. And they do that. If you go on their website, they bury their stuff in words so that you don't want to read it. You read one sentence, you're like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. But hidden in all of that, there are some truths. We're going to talk about that when we come back on A Better Tomorrow.
I started, I was a CBS producer, started on the Dr. Phil show, then I produced the medical talk show, The Doctors. I won an Emmy Award producing that show. The thing with masks is that there's no science that actually proves it works, right? I mean, at least, let me rephrase that. There's crappy science that says that masks have some effect, and there's just slightly less crappy science that says it has no effect. Vaccines are a $50 billion industry a year. If you can quadruple that, you start moving towards it being a $1 trillion industry. And I'm talking about just the vaccines that are there. Remember, adults, you got 11 vaccines. Your children got 52. That means you have about 41 vaccines that they can do a catch-up schedule on. Just imagine $100 for one of those vaccines.
Spy team, check it out. Jason Puckett has the answer.
We've seen multiple versions of this claim. The core is the same. Quote, this week, the CDC quietly updated the COVID number to admit that only 6% of all deaths recorded actually died from COVID, then claiming that it's only about 9,000 deaths that were actually from COVID-19. To see if this is true, we checked with the CDC, CDC archives, and medical documents. To start, this report on the CDC website. It breaks down data from death reports and says, quote, for 6% of the deaths, COVID-19 was the only cause mentioned. That part's verified, but the rest of the claim doesn't add up. First, it says this is a new report this week. Internet archives show the CDC has been publishing this data for months. Here it is on May 9th. Same wording, same report, nearly 4 months ago. So the claim this is new information is false. So what about the other 94% of deaths? Are they not listed as COVID deaths? Well, the CDC calls these comorbidities, conditions or causes, quote, in addition to COVID-19. For example, fourth on the list of comorbidities is respiratory failure. The CDC lists respiratory failure as one of the critical, often fatal symptoms of COVID-19. So let's say COVID caused someone to have respiratory failure and die. Their death certificate would show respiratory failure and COVID. The easiest way to see this is by looking at a real death certificate example. Death certificates list a cause of death and other contributing conditions. So in 94% of the 183,000 COVID deaths, COVID was listed with other factors, but in 6% of them, COVID was the only listed cause of death. With your Verify, I'm Jason Puckett.
So let's get this straight. Based on the recommendations of doctors Fauci and Birx, the U.S. shut down the entire economy, Dave, based on 9,000 American deaths to this coronavirus. They shut down everything for 9,000 deaths. And this video now, because again, minions, they're going to have people who are going to cover things up. When you go on the CDC website, you can go on there. I'm going to tell you right now, it is just a lot of verbiage. There's a lot of words. And they just talk and talk and talk and write and write and write. And they write around all this. It's just noise. It's noise when you look at the page. You don't want to read it because it's just noise. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the end of it all is that the numbers that were originally reported are false. That's it. There's no cut and dry. What they said was the death toll is not actually the death toll, which is what a lot of people have been saying from time.
You know, I wonder, all those hospitals who are supposed to receive the money from reporting the coronavirus deaths, you know, now they have to go there and remodel those numbers, or at least take away, or at least erase those things on the death certificates. You know, what's going to happen to their budget?
I don't care. So the Gateway Pundit reported that the coronavirus fatality rate reported by the liberal mainstream media was completely inaccurate, and the actual rate more like a typical seasonal flu. That's it. So everyone gets a flu. It wasn't all these numbers that they were saying that it was. The media, again, is lying. The mainstream media is lying. So Dr. Fauci and Birx were next to push ridiculous and highly exaggerated mortality rates related to the coronavirus. The CDC silently updated their numbers. Now, this part I'm not going to say. They didn't do it silently. That's one part of the video is right. They have been updating it, guys. We just haven't been paying attention. That's all it is. It was not silent. We just don't pay attention. So this week, it shows that only 6% of all coronavirus deaths were related to the coronavirus. Do you hear that? 6%. 6% is like a spit in the bucket, guy. That's nothing. That's right. Spit in the bucket. The rest of the deaths pinned to this coronavirus are attributed to individuals who had other serious issues going on, which again has been something that's been said. People with underlying issues, if they did get it, would hurt them differently than if someone like you and I who get it. Like, we wouldn't die because we're healthy. But if you are overweight, if you have, diabetes, if you have high blood pressure, if you have any type of lung issues, if you're a chronic smoker, if you're a chronic drinker, if you don't take care of yourself, any flu, Any sickness is going to affect you differently than it's going to affect myself. So this is nothing like, they're acting like this is brand new stuff. It really, really isn't. So almost or most of the deaths that were related to very old Americans. So people who were elderly. I don't mean to sound crass, but they were knocking on death's door anyways. So this just took them out. Everyone knows that elderly people, their immune system is not as high as someone like me and you, or like younger people. So counts of deaths from all causes of death include COVID-19 are presented, as some deaths due to COVID-19 may be assigned to other causes of death. And I'm reading this, by the way, straight from the CDC website. For example, if COVID-19 was not diagnosed or not mentioned on the death certificate, tracking all causes on the mortality can provide information about whether an excess number of deaths is observed, even when COVID-19 mortality may be undercounted. Again, you see all this verbiage? All of this. Guys, long story short again, y'all reported wrong numbers. You reported all deaths that came in. You just took everything. There was an example of someone who died in like a motorcycle accident, and they were like, okay, he died of COVID because he may have had COVID when he was riding the bike. Stupidness, like just everything. Additionally, deaths from all causes, excluding COVID-19, were also estimated. I want you guys to understand, this is a word. This word estimated, we need to talk about what that means and why they're estimating numbers of deaths. This is right on their website, guys. Comparing these two sets of estimates, excess deaths with and without COVID-19 can provide insight about how many excess deaths are identified as due to COVID-19 and how many excess deaths are reported as due to other causes of death. These deaths could represent misclassified COVID-19 deaths or potentially could be indirectly related to COVID-19 pandemic. Guys, you know what I find the most interesting, Dave? Is these bastards say this shit. They put it out there.
Oh my goodness.
They say it to you. And us out here, I'm seeing some people in this, I'm seeing people out here wearing masks because CDC says for wear masks, and because Fauci said for wear masks, and because Trudeau said for wear masks, and Ford said for wear masks.
Wow.
Guys,
I wonder if like the families of those with their misdiagnosis of death, I wonder if they can go out and go sue.
I wonder if you guys could just come out and say the fact that my relative did not die of COVID-19. But this is the thing though, Dave, is a lot of these people, because I've had dialogue with individuals who they've said, oh, my friend died of COVID-19. And I asked them, did they die of COVID-19? Oh, that's what they said. So you don't know if they died of COVID-19. So you have to understand, this is what the doctors, remember, this is what they're getting paid that big money for, is to put on the death certificate, death because of COVID-19. Guys, wake up. We need to wake up. Let this be an alarm to you. Start doing your own research. Again, don't take what Dave and I say about it. Don't take what the Toronto Caribbean newspaper says about it. Don't take what anyone, it doesn't matter who you're following. You have to understand this is a very critical time, and you need to put in the effort to protect yourself, to protect your family, to protect your children, protect the future generation. Guys, this is no joke. This is no joke. We need to wake the hell up. I'm done. If I had a mic to drop, if I could drop this one, I would, but I can't because it's expensive, and Grant will make me pay for it. So, guys, Dave, do you have anything else to say? Do you have anything else to say to our wonderful people out there today?
Thank you for tuning in today. Join us next week. Peace and love, family.
Guys. Peace and love.
I was a CBS producer, started on the Dr. Phil show, then I produced the medical talk show, The Doctors. I won an Emmy Award producing that show. See, the thing with masks is that there's no science that actually proves it works, right? I mean, at least let me rephrase that. There's crappy science that says that masks have some effect, and there's just slightly less crappy science that says it has no effect. Vaccines are a $50 billion industry a year. If you can quadruple that, you start moving towards it being a $1 trillion industry. And I'm talking about just the vaccines that are there. Remember, adults, you got 11 vaccines. Your children got 52. That means you have about 41 vaccines that they can do a catch-up schedule on. Just imagine $100 for one of those vaccines. I was a CBS producer, started on the Dr. Phil show.